Things are getting a lot hotter in Arizona. We have news tonight, but first, Karl Rove, right here, right now. He's the author of the new book, Courage and Consequence. Good evening, Karl.
Good morning. I mean, good evening, Chris.
Whatever it is.
Sorry.
Evening, morning,
Exactly.
They're all the same. All right, speaking of confusion, how about the LA Times and what they've done to Senator Boxer? They endorsed her last time around when she's running. Now they have something blistering in their decision not to endorse anybody in the Senate race, saying about Senator Barbara Boxer that she displays less intellectual firepower or leadership than she could. Wow.
Yeah, it took them a while to wake up, but they finally did, didn't they? That was a powerful non-endorsement endorsement, and it's a sign of the problems that she's got. She is a long-term incumbent. She is supposedly very powerful, and yet she has been consistently under 50% in the polls against her Republican opponents, who are far less well-known than she is. Her problem may be that she is overexposed, too well-known, and has run out of luck with the voters of California.
But, you know, it's funny, in 2004, the LA Times had a much different view, and in endorsing her, they talked about how she helped prevent what they say is misguided exploration for oil and gas in the Arctic National Wild Refuge in Alaska, block confirmation of extremist judicial nominees to prevent new offshore drilling. I mean, they went through a whole laundry list. 6 years ago, they thought she was great. What happened? What changed with the LA Times?
Well, two things. One is, remember, you just ran through a list of basically negative actions. She stopped this, she stopped that. She's now been in the majority. Last time around, she was in the minority. Now she's in the majority, and what has she been able to accomplish, including through her chairmanship of this big committee? And the answer is zero, zip, nada. In fact, I think there was a crystallizing moment for opinion in California that occurred in the hearing. You may remember the moment when she is interrogating a general, and the general refers to her as ma'am, and she proceeds to take his head off. And I think that crystallized for a lot of people in California that both she is a unpleasant person and that she is an overweening politician. I mean, that was just sort of a moment of arrogance to treat this distinguished officer of our military, somebody who has served and sacrificed on behalf of our country, to treat him as she might a doormat was particularly powerful, and I think it crystallized for a lot of people the weaknesses of Barbara Boxer.
Well, but a lot of women sort of applauded her for standing up, and so you'd think in California it might inure to her benefit. But let me ask you another thing, is that President Obama has now twice gone out to campaign for her, and is this sort of a slap in the face of President Obama? Because remember, in 2008, the LA Times endorsed President Obama, saying that he had showed maturity, steadiness, consensus builder, inspires confidence, and now he's telling the people of California, vote for Senator Boxer because she's essentially, his candidate, and the LA Times says, forget about it, we're not doing it.
Yeah. Well, I don't think the president has got an obligation. Any president has an obligation to go in and help members of his party who are up for re-election and in difficult straits. And I think President Obama has demonstrated admirable loyalty by going out there and doing these two events. But no, look, I don't think the LA Times is going to, like any newspaper, would be particularly swayed by the president's involvement if they have strong and harsh feelings towards Barbara Boxer. And I repeat, since she was last up for election, what has she been able to accomplish? In fact, she's shown this imperious attitude. I'm not certain how many women applauded her reading the Riot Act to a military officer for using what is standard practice in the military and referring to a superior woman as ma'am. And so no, the newspaper's not going to be particularly swayed by President Obama, nor should they. They should be looking at the interests of the state of California and the interest of the country, and does the particular individual they're examining stand up for the state effectively and stand up for the country effectively.
All right, let me go across the aisle to the other side of this race, the Republican. Former Governor Sarah Palin endorsing Carly Fiorina over candidate Tom Campbell, who people thought might be more in tune with Governor Palin's political philosophy. Stunned by that or not?
Well, actually, there was a third candidate, State Senator Chuck DeVore, who's the most conservative of the three candidates, and I think a lot of people in California, DeVore supporters, thought that Palin were a little taken aback by Palin endorsing Fiorina. So on the surface of it, she's endorsed a somewhat less conservative candidate than the most conservative candidate. On the other hand, it should make a lot of sense. After all, these were the two most high-profile and most significant women inside the McCain for President campaign, other than the candidate's own wife. And my understanding is they formed a particularly powerful bond during the campaign, had an enormous amount of respect for each other, covered each other's backs, and had an enduring friendship that came out of that. So, you know, it's, in one hand, it's sort of surprising on the basis of ideology, but on the other hand, based on common experience in a campaign where they became quite close personally, this is understandable.
Does this matter to candidate Carly Fiorina? Is this an important endorsement?
Oh, sure. In a primary, to get a high-profile figure like Palin to endorse you helps you. Now, as it is with all endorsements, you only get part of their supporters, part of Palin's supporters, and you get most of her detractors. So, I mean, it's not an unalloyed, no endorsement is an unalloyed advantage for a candidate. But you'd rather have this endorsement than not have this endorsement, and you'd rather have this endorsement than have it go to another candidate in the race. That's for certain. She's going to give Fiorina a pierce.
Would you rather have an endorsement like this, or would you rather have the state newspaper endorse you?
I'd rather, in a primary, have the endorsement of a significant figure inside the party. I mean, newspapers, particularly like the L.A. Times, has a reputation of being a center-left newspaper. So if you get the endorsement of the L.A. Times in the Republican primary, it's not necessarily an unalloyed good. Same with, for example, the Orange County newspaper, which is a sort of a libertarian center-right paper. Its endorsement in a Democratic primary is not as welcomed as other newspapers might be because of the editorial tone of its page. So it just depends on the newspaper, but generally I'd say that it's better to have the endorsement of somebody popular inside your own party in a primary than it is to have a newspaper endorsement from a newspaper that's generally identified with the other party.
You know, it's so interesting. If Senator Barbara Boxer is vulnerable, and many think that she is. A lot can happen between now and November, but if she is vulnerable, this vying between the three candidates who want to be the Republican nominee is extremely important. And so, you know, it's fascinating to watch them. Any thoughts on who's going to emerge the victor on this, or who's got at least the inside track right now?
Well, Fiorina has sort of a little momentum from this and from some other activities going on out there, and I think she's likely to be the nominee. Campbell's giving her a much more spirited fight than was thought at the beginning, but I think at the end of the day, Carly Fiorina wins the nomination, and will be, if she does, a formidable opponent. Campbell would give Boxer a run for money as well. In fact, it's going to be an interesting race because the Republican nominee, if they can come out with a united Republican Party, is going to be able to go after independent and Democrat voters who would readily give their vote to the other state's United States Senator, Dianne Feinstein, but have shown in the recent polling a distinct distaste for Barbara Boxer.
You know, in looking sort of at the big picture of the United States right now, and Dick Morris and I discussed this last night, it certainly seems like the states are in almost a silent revolution going on. When things have a little bit changed right now in terms of the states seem to be mad at the federal government. You've got Arizona on their immigration problem. You've got Florida who is mad about the offshore oil and gas drilling. You've got all the states. There seems to be a little rumbling among the states against the federal government. Am I wrong?
Well, I think we go through a period in which the laboratories of democracy, the states, assert themselves, but it's actually going on all the time. I mean, Massachusetts passing health care reform, Indiana with Governor Mitch Daniels taking very strong stands against public employee unions and what they were doing to the state's pension funds and to the state's pay structure. I mean, you get episodic, episodes where it becomes more pronounced and more visible. But that's one of the great things about a federalistic system is that all the time there are experiments going on around in different ways to solve different problems, and for government to express itself in a different format than sort of one size fits all. And so, yeah, we are, I think, in a period where we're seeing an upswing in the sort of states saying we are going to take a pronounced role in defining our own futures on big issues which might bring us into conflict with the federal government. And that's healthy. Our country is always better for these episodes because the states try things, and in some states they work and tend to get adopted elsewhere, and in other instances they don't work, and as a result states avoid making the same mistake or following the same path.
Well, in a few minutes we're going to show an ad towards the end of the show that Governor Brewer has just taken out against President Obama over this immigration fight. But, I mean, the people of Arizona certainly see, at least a segment of them, a portion of them, seem quite furious at the federal government's inactivity on the issue of immigration. But it seems now to have become a rather bitter fight. Yeah.
Well, look, I've got to tell you, I'm really upset with the President of the United States in his comments 2 days ago. He should be lowering the temperature, not raising the temperature, and he went out and attacked the Arizona law as being racist and bigoted. But look, there's a federal law The Arizona law says that there is a misdemeanor for being in the state illegally, and it allows, under very carefully drawn circumstances, law enforcement to inquire about somebody's immigration status if they have a reasonable suspicion that they're not a U.S. citizen. The federal government has a federal law which says that it's a felony to be in the country illegally and has a much lower standard that allows immigration officials, law enforcement officials, to inquire about immigration status and about your citizenship. So if the president is attacking Arizona for being bigoted and racist, why is he enforcing, and why did he take the oath of office to enforce a law that is even tougher than the Arizona law? I mean, this is just politics, pure.